Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of Sports Talk New York, the Facebook Live edition. This one's a very special one, especially for AJ and I, as we were huge fans of the movie The Bad News Bears. And joining us are right now two members, and hopefully a few more will be all along the way. David Pollock played the nervous left-handed pitcher for the team, Rudy Stein, before Tatum O'Neal's Amanda took over as the ringer. And David actually appeared in both sequels, so he played in all three. He also had prior acting experience in having appeared in Love American Style and the ABC After School Special. And joining him for the reunion is Gary Cavagnaro, who was the only Bear to be kind of known like Derek Jeter. Only had a last name pretty much. I don't know how many people know that Engelberg really did have a first name. I think that would be a great trivia question. We should go back and see how many times you were called Mike in the film. So it's very interesting that you were you were Jeter before there was Jeter. So welcome, David.
Good to be here. Thanks for hosting this.
And welcome, Gary. And like I said, hopefully we're going to have a few others along the way. So that would be interesting as well. So you know, there were auditions in a couple of different places. LA was one of them. That's where they found you, correct, David?
Yes, I had been a professional actor for a number of years, mostly doing commercials and TV shows, like you mentioned. And they did national tryouts for this, but my interview was in the back lot of Paramount Studios.
And what was the audition process for you like?
They actually just kind of took us out back. I think they had multiple people, kids there that they were trying out, and just kind of tossed the ball around and talked to us and just kind of got to know us informally that way.
And Gary, you were in a different place because the filmmakers saw, I believe, over 1,000 kids in Los Angeles, but they felt that a lot of them weren't natural. They felt that they were all basically talking like the Brady Bunch kids and to Hollywood. So they also did auditions in New York, but they found you in Texas. So how did you come about to audition for the part, and how did you get the role?
Well, actually, I think at one time, Michael at the USA Film Festival, Michael Ritchie said they had auditioned 10,000 kids in 10 major U.S. metropolitan areas. So, it's a pretty, as David said, it was a national thing. Back that was the summer of '75. Sounds like the title of a movie. But back then, most things were either filmed in L.A. or New York, and there wasn't much of a film industry outside of California or New York City. And so that summer, they were filming a movie in Dallas called Logan's Run, and it was the talk of the town. It was being filmed at several locations throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. And so one of the local DJs came on the radio one morning and said, "Hey, if you kids want to be in a movie, come to the Apparel Mart," which was one of the sites that they were filming at. Come to the Apparel Mart, to the Kim Dawson agency for an interview. Well, so we had probably 800-900 kids show up there, all thinking we were going to be in Logan's Run. And lo and behold, it was Bad News Bears. So it just so happened my mother worked in that building, and it was summer, so she asked if I wanted to go try out for a movie, and it's like, yeah, great. And we went there originally. There was Michael and Stanley Jaffe, the producer, were not there. It was done on done by I can't even remember. Maybe David or Erin remember our casting director, Sharon something, I think, but she did it with a couple of aides, and they screened through it, and there were like 7 or 8 of us that they wanted to come back for the next day when Michael and Stanley were going to be in town, and I ended up being the only one to make it to the final, basically into the movie.
Nice. So
let me ask a question, Gary. So all the things that after you do on the callback, we talk about what they did the first time out, toss a ball around, talk to you. As the process,
I got no mic from AJ.
Can you hear me now? Is that better? Mark, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Gary? I was asking David, same thing to you. Now that Erin's joined us, as the process whittled down, after the introductions, can you throw a ball? How do you look? What more did they ask you to do as they whittled down the group of people that people actually made the cast?
Well, they had us read some of the lines, typical things you'd expect in a casting call. Seeing how you act, taking us out in the field, making sure that we're really awkward throwing a baseball, and they needed a Jewish-looking kid with zits that couldn't pitch, and I was perfect.
So Erin, you played, and Erin has joined us, as you can see. You played Ahmed Abdul Rahim in the Bad News Bears. You also, just like David, were in the other 2 sequels. You also appeared in numerous episodes of the iconic TV shows, such as The Waltons, Happy Days, and What's Happening, and films Car Wash and Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich. People might not know this, but you were, as an 11-year-old, the actual first-round draft pick of the Bears. I believe you were the first person selected. And tell us how you got to the audition and what that entailed.
Well, I believe I was the second because I think Tatum O'Neal was the first. But the actual guys, I think I was probably the first one because I went on the audition and I didn't like baseball. So I guess my face shows what I feel. So I went there looking kind of mad because I didn't want to go to a baseball audition because I hated baseball. So the director, Michael Ritchie, came to me and said, "You look like you don't want to be here." And I said, "I don't. I hate baseball." And so he said, "Good. I'm the director. You just got the part." I thought he was playing. So they sent me home. And the next thing I know, they had a script to the house, and I was a Bear. Had no idea what was going on next, though.
So, it's also interesting to note that Bill Lancaster, the son of Burt Lancaster, wrote the screenplay, and he was in his 20s at that time. Looking back at that now, as we are all adults, and you look at it, were you surprised at the level of nuances and social critique that were in that movie and that they were written by someone in their 20s? David, you can go first. This way we don't talk over each other.
Yeah, well, I don't think we were just kids ourselves, so we weren't aware of a lot of the social nuances. In fact, I don't think any of us really had a sense that this was going to be anything but a fun summer kids movie. So the fame came later and the sequels. But we got to know Bill and his father Bert would stop by the set a number of times. He was very proud what his son had done. And the only impression I remember having was that it seemed very authentic. We weren't just mouthing what you'd expect to come out of kids on the movies. We were showing it the way it was, raw.
Erin, what about you? What's your feelings on looking back at it now? Obviously, when I saw it, I was 16, but now year after year, when I watch it, it takes on a whole different meaning, especially AJ and I coached travel baseball for many years, and you see the dynamic come through. But This guy was in his 20s when he wrote it.
Well, I mean, I love sports, and it's funny because I like baseball now. Go figure. But when I watch baseball now, and I go to a lot of youth sports leagues, and I watch youth sports, and I actually see what we did back 75 years ago. Whenever we did it, I see the parents are just out of control. The kids, they're pretty much bad, but this is the new normal now these days. I think with the social media, the kids, they get away with a lot more than what we got away with, even though it was a movie. I think they pretty much do the same thing, except for drinking beer. I think they pretty much do the same thing that we did. So it's just history repeating itself.
Let me get back, Erin. You said that you were not a baseball fan when you got the part. One of the things in the movie, you talk about, your hero is Hank Aaron. It comes back a lot of times in the movie. So at what point did you know then or care, or do you want who Hank Aaron was? So now that be your idol.
Well, I researched him. I've always heard of Hank Aaron, and I knew what he did and what he meant to the game, but I didn't really care because I really liked football. Really was a football player. I thought I was going to play for USC, so baseball was the last thing on my mind. But I did understand what he did for the culture, as well as for African Americans and just the baseball period, because it broke a lot of barriers. So hindsight, it was great that it was my idol in the movie. Now I idolize him in real life.
So, I also think in respects that the Bad News Bears in some way was a perfect storm. Michael Ritchie's the director of the film. And for me, looking at his body of work, this kind of completes his hat trick with each successive film in the trilogy, The Candidate in 1972, Smile in 75, and then The Bad News Bears. With each successive film, he kept on pushing the boundaries of social conventions. I have to imagine for him, it had to be extremely challenging and for him to direct a bunch of kids after coming off of films directing Robert Redford, Peter Boyle, Bruce Dern, and Barbara Feldon. But for me, looking at the film again, and looking at the job he did, and in particular, two particular scenes that he was able to make look so natural. One was when Engelbert breaks the windshield and you guys are all gathered around the car. And the second one is where he has that split turn where he becomes one of those, parent, father type guys who is so obsessed in winning when you guys are 2-2 in the championship game. And he, when you did not get hit by the ball, Rudy, David, and he comes back and he starts screaming at you. And then when you see the cut to the dugout and each of your faces, now you guys, granted, some of you were child actors, but there wasn't a great body of work. How did he get those emotions, A, by the car to seem so natural, and B, in that dugout, unbelievable, just the facial expressions while he's screaming at you guys. David, since you were the guy his anger started at most, let's start with you, then we'll go to Gary about the car, and then we'll go to Erin. So go ahead, David.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, that was an interesting scene. And I should point out that there was a certain chemistry. They cast the cast very well. We had chemistry with Michael Ritchie. We had chemistry with Walter Matthau, and that made we kind of played off of each other. And and of course, Walter was a consummate professional.
And Gary, that scene where you guys are all around the car, when he's telling you that you're going to pay for it, that also seemed very natural. What were some of the things that he was able to get out of you guys to make it seem so natural?
Well, I mean, first of all, Michael made it very clear to us that he wanted us to, it was okay to ad lib, and he wanted us to act like we would normally act if our parents weren't there. And so he got a lot of very raw, emotional, uncut 10-year-old, 12-year-old out of us. You asked the first question you asked today was the looks on our faces in the dugout. None of us had ever heard Walter raise his voice before. So that was actually shock, because we'd never heard him raise his voice before. We've been on set with him for 8 weeks, and he'd been nothing but a kind, gentle father figure. And for him to lose, we were all shocked. So those were true reactions. Around the car, and we got this question at the world premiere at the U.S. Film Festival when Michael and I were at that in Dallas. And they asked that question, and Michael was the first one to give me credit. He goes, that was all ad-lib by Gary. When he said bullshit, I hope I can say that on the radio or on Facebook. But
too late now.
We haven't taken it off, so I guess we're okay.
They came out with that term. It shocked everybody. But that's what I would have said as a kid if my parents weren't around. And I think I speak for all of us when I said we were. It was a holiday. We could say and act however we wanted, and we weren't going to get in trouble with our parents. So we just let it hang out there. I remember when I came back with that, because it was ad lib, and Walter just kind of looked at me for a second with his mouth agape, and then burst out laughing. And I thought I was going to get in trouble. And Michael comes in, no, do it again, just like that. So he loved it. But it became one of probably the second most famous ad lib in the movie. The first most famous was Brandon's when Ahmad gets hit below the belt with the baseball, and they come out, run down, and said, somebody get a stretcher, and you hear Brandon in the background say, a stretcher for his balls, which was a great ad lib. But right. everything like that, you can't remember the time. They would never write those things into a scene for a kid to say. So all those
shocking comments from all of us were our own.
So
Yeah, well, let Erin just talk about Michael a little bit. What did Michael Ritchie bring out in you that you were very surprised about that he was able to bring out amongst other members in the cast as well?
Well, I don't want to sound redundant because I believe that Terry and David, they hit the nail on the head. But bottom line, I mean, to piggyback off what Gary said, it was basically just our raw emotions, just because the great actors that we were surrounded by, they basically led us to how we had to act, because a lot of us weren't really actors. And like I said, we fed off of Walter and what Richard, what Michael Ritchie directed Walter to do. So it's fairly easy.
So as Mark said, and Erin, you just said, some of you were child actors, some of you just children who got to act in this movie. Yeah. So the movie comes out and you're 12, 13, 14 years, however old you were. What was the reaction among your friends to see you in the movie, portrayed basically as klutzes? Gary, I want to start with you. I can hear.
Gary, can you hear him?
I hear nothing. I can hear you. I can't hear AJ.
You can't hear AJ, but he can. All right. So he basically he said he wanted to know what it felt like to be portrayed in the movie as klutzes in the beginning.
Well, how did it play out among your friends?
For the most part, none of us. I had played one season of Little League, was not very successful, and I don't think anybody else had a lot of Little League experience. So, it was just. If you had seen the first week we were in LA, we did run-throughs. It was before Walter was cast, before Tatum was cast, and we were just a bunch of kids they took out to a field, and we played baseball. And some of the later cuts that they got were inspired by what they saw from us when we went out just as kids playing baseball for the first time. We were bad.
My question is, how did that movie play out among your friends back home? They saw you on screen. They saw you portrayed as you were. How did your friends react to you being in the movie?
I don't know if he can hear you. So we'll ask all of you. The question, yeah. So the basic question is, you guys went back to school after this. Your kids. You go back to school. What did some of your friends, talk to you about after seeing you guys on the screen playing ball and being in this movie? So, Erin, you can start on that one.
Well, I went to Catholic school, and I couldn't use that language at home, but I did it on the streets because I grew up listening to Richard Pryor and George Carlin. So when they told me I could cuss in the movies, it was, I had a field day. I was like, I can get paid to do this. So when I went to school, everybody said, "Oh, you in a movie that let you be yourself, huh?" Yeah. Basically, I was already cussing.
So let me ask you a question. You mentioned Richard Pryor, and obviously one of your iconic lines is up in the tree. It seems like Richard Pryor could have actually uttered that line. Was that an ad lib, or was that something that was written into the script?
No, that was written. I wasn't a good ad lib like Brandon.
You must have loved saying it, though.
Oh, I love saying I love cussing. It was like I said, George Carlin, Richard Pryor. I was in heaven, and I got paid for it.
So I was.
The interesting thing is, and Gary, I think you alluded to it.
Sorry, y'all were talking over each other.
Oh, I was just going to add.
Somebody
I was attending Montclair High School. Kind of out in the Inland Empire of Los Angeles back then. And I was in the drama club, and all my fame accomplished for me is, allowing me to get good parts in the plays that we were doing in the theater department at Montclair High School. And I think I was probably more famous than I knew, because I was just trying to get through high school, and I didn't really hear. But that was kind of every kid on the campus knew who I was and what movie I was in.
And Gary, what about for you when you went back to school?
Well, I did another movie called Drive-In immediately after Bad News Bears. So I didn't get back to school until the second half of the year. and by that time, and that was so. By the time I got back, the movie was still maybe 3-4 months from coming out. People knew what I'd done. A lot of people would say, we don't believe you did that. What did you? So when the movie actually came out, it was a big deal. I grew up in the Dallas area, but I grew up in a part of Dallas called Highland Park, which is a city surrounded by Dallas. It's about a 4 square mile city, and own newspaper and everything else. And so they did articles about me. I mean, it's a big thing because, again, at that time, if you weren't in California or New York, you weren't in the movie business. So it was a big it was probably a much bigger thing for me in Texas than it was for Erin and David there out there in California, where everybody's in the movies, right? If you're walking, talking, and breathing, you've been an extra, you've been something.
Not quite like that, but
yeah, much more commonplace than what I think. I think that when I did that in Dallas, I was probably maybe even the only person in Dallas who'd been in a major motion picture. So it was a big difference.
Yeah.
Mark, are you there?
And of course, then David and I went on to professional baseball careers.
Oh yeah, you should tell them about that. This was back in 2005. Gary and I did I won't call it a publicity stunt. It was a charity game for a minor league team called the Brockton Rocks, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was part of the Canadian American League, which also doesn't exist anymore. But the whole idea was that we were going to wear replica Bears jerseys along with the other members of the team, and we were auctioning off those jerseys to the people in the crowds, and the money went to Easter Seals. But the whole idea was that I was going to be the opening pitcher, Gary was the opening catcher. We were going to pitch to the first batter of the opposite team and then retire. And they actually signed us as players on the team, so we actually have official baseball statistics for having done that. Lucky for me, my relief pitcher was Oil Can Boyd, who had retired to the minors by then, and so he, even though I walked the first batter, he pulled out the game.
That Oil Can Boyd is quite a character. We've had him on the show also, and to be followed by Oil Can Boyd, that I don't know if that's good or bad, what that says.
Well, it was all for charity, so I think Oil Can was during the warm-ups. Oil Can was kind of disgusted with me because I can't pitch at all, and it was kind of embarrassing because they were clocking the pitches, and it was all I could do to get 35 miles an hour.
Well, he was probably the only person who could have relieved David, because we were both in our mid-40s. We were mid-40s. So he's probably the only person in professional baseball who could have relieved David that was older than David.
So let me start with Erin on a question. I know where Mark is. We lost Mark. He's coming back. So all three of you start with Erin, then go to David, then to Gary. When was the last time you watched the movie? And what thoughts do you have now, than you did even 10 years ago, maybe the last time you watched it?
But I believe the last time I watched it, I was my doorbell rang and my neighbor came over. He said, "Hey, come here for a minute." We went to his house and he said, "Man, your movie's on AMC channel." He said, "This is a classic." And he said, "I grew up watching you." And he said, "It is a classic." And I said, "Yeah, it just dawned on me too, because it was just something that we were doing. It was our job. We were really just hanging out with our friends. Once I got to know Gary and David and the other guys, we just became friends. So it was more like every year for 2 years, we'd hang out with our friends. And that was it. I never thought of it as being such a monumental thing. Now that my neighbor actually pointed it out to me, then it kind of was like, wow, maybe it was a big deal,
David?
Well, it was never intended to be a big deal.
Right.
That's the thing. This was a movie that someone owed a favor to Burt Lancaster, agreed to make his son's screenplay into a movie, and it was going to be a small time movie. But right before they started filming, Paramount looked and they didn't have any big summer releases. So they decided to make a big push with it. And that's when they brought in Walter and Tatum to have 2 big headliners on it and make it into a big movie. But when we were all cast, this was maybe a Class B, Class C movie for them. So, I think we alluded earlier that it's become iconic, but none of us really thought of it that way at the time. Our biggest concern was, are we going to win or are we going to lose? Because they filmed the double ending, and none of us knew until the movie was actually released whether we won the championship or whether we lost it.
I'm back, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. Now your video's on too.
Yeah, it was weird. Very strange. I don't know what exactly happened there, but when I came back, I brought a special guest with me. So this special guest is not actually a bear. He's a member of the 1976 Little League Championship that you guys lost to. The starting pitcher in that game, none other than Joey Turner, Brandon Cruz himself. How you doing, Brandon? Can you hear us, Brandon?
He's muted. Unmute him, Mark. He's muted.
Hold on. Let's see. I did on. He might be on. He might be muted on.
He's on mute.
He's muted. He's on mute. There we go.
I wanted to be a bear.
You what? Well, you know what? So that's interesting you say that, because I read a story that you showed up to the auditions with a pretty big ego. And because of that ego, your ego was too big to be a bear, so they made you a Yankee. Is that true?
Well, the ego part is definitely still going today. It was the first time I had ever been asked to interview for a movie. And I kind of walked in like, what do you mean I got to interview for this? And I read for Jackie's part. I read for Kelly Leak. And Michael was like, no, wait, we got another part. And I read for that. And then I walked out going, Dad, I blew that. I've never done it. I never auditioned. I always had, after Eddie's father, I just kind of got parts. And then they called like a couple days later and said, "Yeah, you're on the Yankees. You're on the other team." And I went, I'm not a bear, so I did it, and it was awesome. I met all these guys, and we've remained in touch haphazardly, but we all talk to each other and stuff. But yeah, I was kind of a cocky kid. I was 13. I was probably high.
You weren't alone.
I was into surfing and skateboarding and, drinking and doing drugs and girls. And I was, I guess, a little bit more advanced in some ways. A lot of these guys came, from back east and weren't ball players. And I hated baseball as well. I was with you, Erin. I didn't like baseball. I was a surfer and skateboarder and getting into punk rock. So, but I could play a little bit. Wasn't who was the best player on the team who actually portrayed the worst player? Guy who played Lupus. That dude could play.
Really?
That dude could play ball. I think they made him play right-handed because he was left-handed. But I don't know.
So,
That's an easy memory from 1975.
Yeah, that was
well, I do want to ask you this. And I asked the guys this before, and you might have a little different take on it given your background, because people might not know a lot about you, because after Courtship of Eddie's Father than this movie, your life went in a little different direction. You were in a punk rock band, the Dead Kennedys, which is an iconic punk rock band, which basically satirized popular social norms. And also you did work on South Park, which is a cartoon that does the same. Looking back at the Bad News Bears and the way it satirized, suburban baseball, does it take on more meaning for you when you watch it now, or have you even seen the movie in the last 10 to 20 years?
I see it all the time. My kids, every time it's on, they call me and they're like, "Dad, this is awesome," because the show that movie would never be done today. I mean, there were lines that Chris said that would never make it ever. And a lot of our ad libs would never make it. And, Bill wrote a hell of a story, but like you guys were talking about, Michael Ritchie had a $20 bounty for the best ad lib. And I think I got the first 20, but we all tried to up each other. And, everybody, I think, made at least $20. I I maybe got 80 or 100 because I was a big mouth and I was a ham. But it was, I think it was a very accurate portrayal of Little League because my dad was a coach. My grandpa sponsored a team. My uncle ran the Little League in Oxnard up here where I still live. And it was like that, if not even worse. I mean, Vic Morrow was a Little League dad. That was an accurate portrayal. I don't think it was a satire. I think it was real life. And people were shocked that kids talk like that. And people were shocked that parents acted like that. We just brought it to the screen.
Well, you say that Mark and I, as Mark said, coached a little bit of baseball together. And when I watched that movie again last night before we had this conversation today, it reminded me of a particular father-son team that we coached against. Same thing. It was toxic between the father and the son. The son was the pitcher. He would curse at the father in the dugout. They go back and forth. It's real life on that. You're right, Brandon. It really replicates what goes on in Little Leagues.
But here's a conversation AJ and I had this morning, and okay, I just turned 60, and obviously from the time this movie came out to now, social mores and values and as such have changed. And where I might go to a movie today, and some of the things that Tanner Boyle uttered, if I saw it in a movie today, made today, I would cringe and I would feel uncomfortable, and rightfully so for some of the words. But yet, I can watch this movie today, and the line when Amanda comes to the field and is added to the team, and I don't cringe, and I don't know why. And his words don't bother me. And AJ and I had this conversation. And I said, why? Like, so let's start with Erin. I mean, you've watched this movie. Obviously, one of the words in there is a very toxic word, okay? And it shouldn't be said. But when Tanner says it, it doesn't have that same meaning to me because he's a kid. I don't know. So, Erin, why don't you start and let's go around and see how you guys feel when you watch that and you hear Tanner speak like that these days.
Well, first of all, being black and growing up in the 60s and the 70s, I got called that word a lot. So it really wasn't anything. It wasn't a stretch to hear it. But nowadays with social media and everybody's so tight in the ass about everything and so conservative that, I mean, I think people look at, people have too much time on their hands. It was just a movie. The words were just done for the effect, for the reason, for the movie, for the cause. And I think even today, there's movies like Blazing Saddles would never been made.
That's a perfect example. That's a great example.
Right. Yeah. But back then, it was normal. It was semi-normal because that's what people were called. Black people were called back then, so it really wasn't a big deal. It was something that was like saying good morning. So again, I think it's just these days social media and people that just they think too much need to understand it was just a movie. Enjoy yourselves, have a beer, laugh at it, try to live your life right, and don't that's all you can do is enjoy what you're supposed to enjoy and do you.
Mark, we get a couple of questions in the chat room also.
Well, yeah, but let's finish with this one because David, especially because you're a person that went into politics. Obviously, one slip of the tongue or one line uttered, taken out of context, could derail an entire political career. So speak to those scenes where if we watch it today, people our age, we don't cringe. But if we see a movie made today, we cringe. What's your opinion on it?
Well, that's interesting. I only got into politics to do community service, and it turned out that I have a fairly good filter on my mouth, and people trust me to not say the wrong thing. But I always said I think there's a reason that we see actors become politicians because if you're an actor, you're putting yourself literally in some other character's shoes and looking at the world with your eyes. And that has definitely helped me in the political realm. But as far as social media and the current state of things, I think somewhere about 40 years ago, politics started becoming very toxic. I had one congresswoman tell me that she didn't understand how it became either you're my party or you're dead to me kind of an attitude. And I'm also a student of history, and I know that the United States has gone through periods like this before. Unfortunately, one time ended up in a civil war, but we've had divisive issues where people were bitterly divided. And I don't know that this is probably one of the worst times for that. So we can only hope that we're able to get past this and start finding things to unite around. I thought, this new virus would be fine. Finally, we have a common enemy that we can all agree on, and just watch that all fall apart too. So, we live in a very interesting time.
Okay, I did. Hopefully, I don't know. It looks like he's working on his boat. Brandon, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so
I'm working on a boat.
I see that. It's pretty good. So here's a question for you. I know that you had some, part in South Park, and I don't remember the actual episode, and I don't know if you remember this, but there's an episode where they try to give Cartman sensitivity training, and there's this whole, it's almost an amusement park for bigotry. And it's trying to desensitize them. And Cartman goes through this walkway, and it's this arch with just nothing but racial epithets of every single religion, every single ethnicity. And Cartman thinks it's the coolest thing. I think South Park is the only mainstream type of entertainment which has somewhat of the sensibilities that were in the Bad News Bears, and yet there you don't cringe either. So what is it about those two different shows, the movie and South Park, that we accept it from kids, because Cartman is a kid?
We're just become Gilligan's Island.
We're adrift in a harbor here.
Oh no!
Hang on.
This is live.
Yeah,
live
this is live. We
You're actually
we're adrift.
Oh, you're adrift.
I'm on a boat working on another big boat. We're good.
Okay.
Got a rower here. He's rowing for sure. South Park, they got away with a lot of stuff. I think being on cable, they were able to do things that nobody else could, and they pushed the envelope. And I only worked the first 3 seasons. They're 20 seasons deeper now. This is season 23 for those guys. They still blow me away. That they are topical, that they get away with what they get away with. It's pretty amazing. I think the difference between Bad News Bears and South Park is, South Park's doing it now in the era of ultra PC, and we just did it because that's what everybody's been talking about. That's the way a lot of us talked, and that's the way a lot of people were referred to. It was not a great time to be a person of color, to be a person of different sexual identities or whatever. But I think Tanner's part was kind of the mouthpiece for the state of the society at that point. And they just turned him loose. He just got to say these words, and it wasn't great, but it's a sign of the times. Like I said, it couldn't ever be done again. I really doubt it. They couldn't even get away with breaking training with what they got away with in the original.
Right.
I remember I saw Billy Bob Thornton right after he did the other one, the last one.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Hey, you were in the original." Yeah. So yeah, I did this other one. I go, "Yeah, it was horrible." and he said, "You know what? I agree." He agreed. Not that he wanted to, use racial epithets or, demean anybody, but it didn't have the impact because what we did was a piece of Americana, a piece of history. It's iconic. It's a classic. It'll never be done again. And I feel really proud to have been a part of that. Because we had such an amazing group of people from all over the country, from all walks of life. You know, some of those guys I didn't get along with at one point or another, but by the time the filming was over, we were family, and it was awesome. You know, and Michael and those guys, they brought together a group of people that I don't know if it'll ever be done again.
To that point, there's a question in the chat room by Tom Sullivan. He says he wants to know what your guys' recollections of working with Walter Matthau was, and how did Tatum O'Neal fit in with the rest of the cast. So let's start with Gary for that one. Gary, you want to answer that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Walter, you got to remember, Walter's son, Charlie, was on the Athletics. He was the one that asked Chris if I can't even remember what the context was, but does he go to the bathroom for you too, or something like that. But so he had a son that was our age, and he was very, very fatherly, I guess is the best way to put it, toward all of us. Had an enormous amount of patience with us, and we were all very fond of him. I think I can speak for everybody. Say there was nobody who didn't think of Walter almost like a second dad while we were on the set. He'd go over when Jack Lemmon was there, he'd go over with Jack, and they'd entertain all the mothers who were sitting in the shade while we were doing the filming with their old vaudeville routines. Just great people. That generation of actors, many of them, Burt Lancaster, John Wayne, Jack Lemmon, many of them visited the set while we were doing it, and they were all just nice people, very down to earth, not big timing yet. So that was great. And, you know, as late as, I mean, when I got married, I got a gift and a card from Walter congratulating me. And, you know, we had not been in close touch, but, you know, all until the time he died, we got a Christmas card from him and every year. And he made the effort to keep in touch with us. So just a really, really nice man. Tatum, you know, she came to set. She had done won an Academy Award in her first movie. She was a little bit, she wasn't any older than I was, but she was a little bit more advanced in life than I was, because I'm a product of Texas, which was a lot further behind. A 13-year-old in Texas is a lot further behind a 13-year-old in Hollywood. So I know Brandon and Jackie hung with Tatum a little bit more than I think the rest of us did, but and at first it was not the best match, but as Brandon said, you know, by the time it was all over, we were all very good friends.
Erin, what about you? Your recollections of working with the two, you know, both of them coming off of, you know, Oscars?
Well, I had a crush on Tatum O'Neal. She didn't know that, but I thought she was sexy. Still think she's sexy. I think Walter was sexy too, as well as a great actor, and turned out to be just like same thing Gary says, like a great friend and almost like a father figure. It was just phenomenal to watch The Odd Couple as a kid, and then to be in a movie with them. It was awesome.
David, for you?
Well, I saw Walter as a mentor. He kind of took us under his wing. I remember one of his big pieces of advice about comedic acting was, David, don't put whipped cream on top of the whipped cream. I didn't quite know what he meant by that at the time, but it's stuck with me ever since. In 2000, there was a group of us that got together, I think about 6 of us, to do a cover story for TV Guide. You guys remember that? And we started talking about the movie, and one of the scenes that everyone seemed to remember the most is where Walter asks Rudy Stein to go in and get hit by the ball a second time. And, you know, I'm kind of stuttering and not wanting to do it, but we must have done that scene at least 20 times, because every time I would look up at Walter and shake my head, he would burst out laughing. But, you know, to me, that was the ultimate compliment. You know, here's one of the masters of comedic acting in the industry, and he thinks I'm funny. And we didn't really get to know Tatum that much, and we all had our own dressing rooms to go back to across the street from the park that we were filming at. And I actually got to know Tatum's dad better than Tatum, because he was at the set a lot. So we kind of could joke around with him and interact. But I agree with Gary, and Brandon and Jackie and kind of got to know Tatum better than we did. They were more on her wavelength.
So Brandon, this one's for you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, cool. So So, all right. So you go from being the son of probably the dad that every boy in the United States wants to have in Bill Bixby in The Courtship of Eddie's Father, to the son of, probably the nightmarish dad, little league dad that Vic Morrow played so well, which is interesting because that's a role that he really seemed to embrace, and something I don't think any one of us would ever want to be playing, but he does it so well. You go from that to that, and you're part of probably one of the most unsettling moments in the movie, the slap. How did you prepare for that moment, and what did you bring to get ready for that?
Well, we had rehearsed the scene of the slap, and they gave us our marks. And I'll preface this with probably not a popular opinion, but Vic was not a really nice guy. He was a very consummate professional. He was, but he just didn't like kids, I don't think. And he came up and he had a job to do, and he took it very seriously. And we got our marks. We broke for lunch. We came back from lunch, and they rolled on one rehearsal. Michael liked to see rehearsals because he liked to get the reactions that happened in reality rather than really rehearsed. So he rolled rehearsal, and I noticed before they said action, Vic was about 6 inches in from his mark, and he slapped me. I don't know if he did it on purpose or not, but he hit me. And the look that I had when I came up from that was very real because it hurt. And I think it added a lot to it. It wasn't the first time I'd been slapped by an adult, and won't be the last. But it was kind of it just showed what Vic was like. I mean, Vic was the real deal. He had done combat and rat patrol, and he'd done some amazing stuff. And I don't know. I think he was well cast. I think he portrayed what a little league dad exactly was like, that kind of win at all costs kind of thing. And when I threw the ball at David's head, we used a rubber ball, but I tried to hit him. I wanted to, because it kind of got a competitive amongst us. Not only to do the ad libs, but to do what the part was requiring. I think as we started doing the show, we started realizing more and more as filming went on what we were part of.
So I guess the question for your other guys is, when you're on the field and you see him go over there and the slap, what's the first thought that goes through your guys' heads? Erin, you start. Like, do you remember that day, that scene being shot?
Yeah, but I don't think we were actually in that scene because they shot that separately. We were probably at school.
So you didn't even see the slap?
No, I didn't see it until I saw the movie. When I saw the movie, I was really shocked though, because it was so lifelike. It was really weird. It was just really real. So, but it just was something that we read the script, obviously, but when you see things manifested in real time, it was unbelievable.
And David, so you guys, none of you, David and Gary, you were there because you actually, the next pitch is the ground ball to him. So what, do you remember the scene and the slap?
Yeah, well,
I don't.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't particularly remember that. I think we may have done that separate, having me walk in to take the ball. But no, I don't recall seeing that until I actually saw the movie.
Gary, how about you? Because
he actually threw the pitch that we did the thing where he threw the pitch in my head a couple times. He actually hit me once, and it was probably on purpose. So I was like, heck yeah, go ahead, slap him. He hit me. No, it was shocking, and so many of those things in that movie were meant to be shocking. Chris's line that you referred to earlier, it was meant for the shock value. You see a real kid acting that way. It was kind of a mirror that I think that Michael was holding up to people, saying, "This is what you're creating, right? A little racist, a win at all cost kid in Brandon's character, and that was the whole point of those scenes, was he's holding up a mirror to suburban Little League baseball, which at the time was really, really popular. And it's what is this doing to your kids? What is it doing to your family? What's it doing to your relationship with your son? So, I was there, and I remember. I didn't know he actually made contact with Brandon. I thought he had pulled it, but I just remembered the scene, thinking, "Boy, I don't think my dad would ever do that. I don't think I could make my dad mad enough to take a swing at me." Right? So it was very shocking.
While we've been talking a little bit here, Mark's been flashing on the screen some of the baseball cards from the Bad News Bears. I took a look, and Gary, the Engelberg card goes for $4 now on Amazon or something. I'm looking in the background, seeing what you have, and do you have, David, in your bookcases there or anything, do you have any memorabilia around? If so, what's your prize thing? Do you collect any of the things that have gone over the years and issued when the movie came out and been reissued and things like that?
Well, I have the movie posters up in my office here also, which you can probably see in the background.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so that's the main thing. I still have bits of the uniform that I wore, and a lot, a whole case that has a lot of the pictures and things that I collected. Like, for example, how many people can say they were actually in a coloring book? And there was all sorts of merchandising that went on.
Lunchbox.
But yeah, that's about it. Gary, Erin, and I have gone to some autograph shows in the past few years. And I think we were all kind of surprised that people would pay money for our autograph. I think, wow, that's okay. After 40 years. But yeah, there's still a fan base out there.
Erin, what about you? You have any memorabilia, uniform, anything?
I do. I have everything in my office too. My office, David, my office is not as nice as yours. My office looks like a train wreck because I actually do work in there. Looks like you just lay up in there and watch TV. It's so neat. How do you keep it so neat? But I can show you my office. Would you like to see my office?
Yeah, let's see.
Sure.
Yeah, let's go on a tour of Erin's office. But no, I have a lot of memorabilia too. No, that's not it.
Behind
that's
different type of memorabilia.
That looks like all the type of beer that Buttermaker drank. Interestingly enough, never drank.
I go into my dark cave. But yeah, I have this is my office is not as neat as his, but I do have some Bad News Bears.
There we go.
Okay.
Got the poster.
And then but I'm a Laker fan, so I have a lot of Laker memorabilia. But other than that, yeah, my office is not as nice as David's.
What about you, Gary? You have any memorabilia from the movie?
Well, I mean, I still wear my "I'm Available" T-shirt every Saturday. So, but I had my uniform. I did a card show, and a guy came up and approached me and wanted to buy it and donate it to the Smithsonian for their Hollywood in the movies. And so I ended up selling it to the guy because I figured I'd take it and take the money and divide it between my 4 kids and let them put it in their college funds. So I sold the uniform probably 15 years ago. But I've got the movies. I've got we had Neiman Marcus down here had a whole line of clothing for Bad News Bears that they gave me the samples. So I got that type of thing. I got like the guys. I got the posters. I still got a Bad News Bears bat that Louisville Slugger brought out. They had a white bat and it had Tatum O'Neal's caricature on the end of it.
Yeah, speaking of T-shirts, I don't know if this is true, but there was a story there that Michael Ritchie one day on set showed up with a Gary Cavagnaro fan club T-shirt and he was wearing it. Is that true?
Of course.
So what goes through your mind when you see him showing up with that shirt?
Well, not only did he had one. Stanley Jaffe had one, the producer. Walter even had one. And they did that on my 12th birthday. And part of what they did on my 12th birthday, not only was that, they had me filming the scene where I picked up the baseball and fling it and it hits his window. So they had me bend over, pick up the ball. I turn around to fling it, and Michael and Stanley threw lemon meringue pies in my face. And of course, being a 12-year-old kid, I grabbed it and started chasing around and threw it back at them. Right. So I actually got a film that they filmed that for me, and that's got a DVD of that at my house, which is one of the memorabilia things. But yeah, I was, as the guys were on test, I was the big kid. I was the one that got made fun of, not toward the end, but more at the beginning. And they knew that was kind of rough on me. I was away from my own home, my friends. And so Michael, that was just part of Michael and Stanley. They're trying to make all the kids feel comfortable. And, it was just kind of a shout out that they did. And it was very nice of them.
I don't know how many of you guys have seen this, but they've basically taken the Karate Kid and moved the storyline 34 years later, and with all the original cast members, seeing what their lives are like now and what those particular moments, going back to Johnny Lawrence losing the tournament, the All Valley tournament, and how their lives have gone on from that point. I'm just wondering, given the fact that most of you guys are all still around, with the exception of Walter Matthau, obviously, if there was everyone, and forget about like the sequels, but with so many different streaming, platforms out there, has anyone ever approached you guys to maybe make like a 1 hour special, like a reunion and going down to Mason Field and doing something along those lines, carrying the storylines further, like what happened to each of these guys, what their lives became? Anybody?
Well, TV Guide did that. They had Where Are They Now as part of their what was that, 30 year or 25 year? I can't remember.
I think it was the 30, but I'm not talking about Where Are They Now as far as you. I'm talking about taking the actual characters. Like what was their life arc like? Because that's what this does. It's called Cobra Kai. But for me, that would be interesting to kick around, because there's so many people that are invested in these characters, and people still watch, and everyone remembers the names of every player on that team pretty much.
Well, what's funny is now my two of my sons interviewed for the Billy Bob Thornton version. Okay. And it was really funny because initially, according to the director, when my middle boy made it to the last cut for Engelberg, he just wasn't big enough for him. But the director I was talking to, he said, yeah, we originally asked Paramount if we could have some of the Bad News Bears original cast on here as the parents and kind of tie this remake into the original Bad News Bears. And he said Paramount wanted to have nothing to do with it. Now, I don't know why, because that was the natural time, right?
Right.
So that's really the only time I've ever heard of anybody even thinking of that.
Yeah. All right. So let's wrap up a little bit. So when was the last time any of you guys have ever made the trek down to Mason Park? And when you pass it, or when you've been there, what's the feeling that goes through your mind? Erin, you can go first on that one.
Well, I'm a mobile DJ now, so I go all around. And when I pass by anywhere in that area, I just think about the good friends, Gary, David, Brett Marks, or Brett says to tell everybody hi, by the way. He wanted to make it,
but he's actually working today. Yeah.
Yeah. Just friendship. You think about good friends, and then a little piece of me says, "Hey, I did something big here one day, or a long time ago, I did something real big here." That's about it.
David, how about for you?
Yeah. Well, we spent 10 weeks there filming, so we got to know it pretty well. It's a lot different than it was then, because it's all, we have condos everywhere and houses. But the last time I was there was probably 2016, when I was running for the state Senate here in California. A news group wanted to meet me there and kind of do a story about that. But it seems like every few years, somebody wants to do a news story and meets us at the park. I know Erin and I did one several years ago where they interviewed us at the park. The thing is that there's nothing there that would ever tell you that there was a movie film there. I mean, even the original dugouts and things were all torn out. There's a baseball field there still, but it just looks like an ordinary baseball field. And to make it even more confusing, there's actually a Bad News Bears field in West Los Angeles, and that everyone thinks is where we filmed the movie. But in fact, that was a tribute to to Mr. Lancaster because that's where he played Little League and he got the inspiration for the original movie.
Gary, how about for you? Have you ever been back to the field in recent years, and what's your first memory that comes back?
Yeah, I was there probably. Yeah, I am obviously out of state, but I have I cover a territory, or used to cover a territory that included the LA area. So I think the last time I was there was probably 2013 or 14. And I was shocked because, when we were there was nothing there. There was a baseball field, there was farms across the street, farms on three sides of it, and then you had the strip center with the Baskin Robbins and Love's Barbecue about half a mile down the road. And that was all that was around there. And now you come up there and you got condos right up the edge. I think they took down, I don't know if it's still down or if it was for repair, but when I was there, they'd taken down the outfield wall. As David said, they torn out the original dugouts. So a little bit sad, quite honestly, to see that it's just a metropolitan park. There's not, as David said, there's nothing there to indicate that Bad News Bears, that iconic movie, was filmed there. And so that's a little bit sad, but times change and it is what it is. So but it was neat. I take people by there when I'm in town, or used to, and because all my customers would want to know. So invariably we'd eat lunch down at Love's and I'd take them up to the ballpark and show it to them. So it was just so it's a neat experience, but it is totally different now.
All right, we're going to close this out with a question for each of you. The same question each. We'll start with Brandon. Brandon, while he's working, he's been kind enough to be on this stream. Literally, this is, he's on a lake, so I guess this is really a live stream.
On the ocean.
Oh, on the ocean. All right. So the question for you is best and worst thing about that movie for you. The best thing that came out of it and the worst thing that came out of it.
Best thing, there were a couple. Being known as a part of such an iconic film, getting to work with the cast and crew. I mean, the cast was amazing. John Alonzo, the director of photography, was as good as it gets. The teachers that we had, Portia was amazing. Getting to hang out with Ryan O'Neal and Tatum, who was fresh off a year or two removed from an Academy Award at the age of 10. I could go on and on about how awesome it was being a part of it. The worst part about it was that it was over, and I didn't get to go on and I wasn't a bear. I didn't get to go on and be in the sequels. And they actually talked about making me a bear because the last scene of me not being so happy with Vic, it kind of made sense, but they didn't write it in. So the worst part was that I wasn't a bear. The best part was that the Yankees won. So,
but before we get Erin,
my note is that they weren't sure how that ending would go with the film going public. They actually shot an alternate ending to the movie where the Bears won.
Right now, I heard there were. But before we get to that, just major props to you guys because Bad News Bears is Brett Boone's favorite movie. He just put that out in the chat room, so that's pretty cool. So here's the question that before we move on to Erin and ask him the favorite and best and worst. David, since you brought it up, yes, there was an alternate ending written. Obviously, the original screenplay that Bill wrote supposedly was loosely based around him. He was a little bit of a bad boy, evidently, supposedly, but there was. Evidently, the one where you guys won, there were two different versions I heard. One was that Kelly Leak actually scores the winning run and then has to run because the police are chasing him. And that was the way it ended. The other one was just, it was an extra man on base and the Bears won, but when it tested high with adults but very low with young adults. So they went with the Bears losing because it made it more real. So you guys were there. You shot the alternate ending. So David, what was the alternate ending?
Well, the alternate ending was the second scenario that you mentioned, where we just have an extra run on base, and then the confrontation of the two teams at the end is very different. And I should point out the Bears losing was the way the original script was written. I don't remember the scene where Brandon was or Jackie was chased off with the police. That I don't know if the other guys remember that, but I only remember doing one alternate version.
All right. All right. So, Erin, best and worst part of being in the movie for both of you guys will be the movies. Best and worst part.
It's really simple. I think the best part was meeting all these guys and getting a friendship, lifelong friendships. I know it sounds cliche, but it's the truth. And the worst part of it was, well, there's the worst part of it that it didn't go on forever. We didn't do any more than 3, but it was also that I think the worst part for me is that, like, even now, people don't recognize it as a great movie. I think when you say sports movies, they always say the Hoosiers and, you know, something else. And I'm like, what about the Bad News Bears? If you grew up looking at baseball or watching baseball, you had to like the Bad News Bears. So I think the worst part is like not being recognized as a great movie.
David, for you?
Well, I pointed out that most actors go through their entire careers never being in anything as memorable as the Bad News Bears was. It became kind of an iconic movie of our times. And so, you know, I was very lucky to be part of that. But the worst part is that I don't think most people realize how hard acting really is. You see all the glamour of it and when people are really successful. But behind that, there's a lot of hard work of going to a lot of interviews and having to endure a lot of rejection before you finally get a part. And it's the reason I got out of acting, although some would say I haven't really, was I knew it wouldn't be as much fun if I had to depend on it for a living. It's a real tough way to earn a living, and 99% of the Screen Actors Guild is unemployed on any given day. So it's a tough way to try and make a living. So I'm glad I did that when I was a kid. It was fun. I'm thrilled that I did something that is so memorable. But beyond that, I obviously didn't want to pursue it any further.
Gary, for you?
Yeah, best and worst are kind of tied together for me. Because the best part of it is it was truly a life-changing experience for me. I got there. I was a kid from Texas without a lot of confidence, 5 foot tall, weighed 200 pounds, 210 pounds, this little butterball. Got sick while I was doing the movie, went to a doctor who gave me the raw data that said that, hey, you're going to be dead by the time you're 19 if you keep up this way. So you can see in the movie, I in the course of filming that movie, I lost about 35 pounds. And by the time I was finished, I lost about 70 pounds. And so that was life-changing for me in so many ways. And that was very positive, along with meeting some really close, as Erin said, lifelong friends. I mean, here we are 40, almost 45 years later, we're still talking to each other, right? Worst part is because of that weight loss, I didn't do the second and third movies. They called and asked me if I'd do the part and wanted me to gain 100 pounds. And I just flatly said no. And that cost me the ability to do the second and third movies with the other guys. So, which, yeah, in retrospect, I would love to have done them, but I didn't need to put on that. I didn't need to get back in that trap. I might not have been here now to have this discussion if I had.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the other 2 movies. There's they allude to almost a 4th movie at the end, where I think Tony Curtis mentions the Japanese manager. You know, he's going to get Castro to throw out the first ball in Cuba. There was going to be a Bad News Bears go to Cuba, but that never happened. But interesting, the legs and what it spin-off TV show and then a remake. So. Erin, when you kind of said that people don't mention, I think, I think maybe the Bad News Bears go to Japan, the TV show and the remake is why maybe it's not held as high. If it was just that one, like similar to Slapshot, the one-off where it gets lightning in a bottle and how quickly they came out. Because basically Bad News Bears, there was a movie every year in my high school, basically, of the Bad News Bears, between 16, to the time you graduate high school. And some of you guys were, I guess, 13 or 14 when the first movie, you weren't as believable in that last movie as young kids anymore. Most of you guys were already shaving, I assume.
Yep.
So, all right, guys, listen, I really appreciate you taking out the time. And Brandon, the only non-bear here, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Love you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Miss you all.
Love you, Brandon. Love you guys. We'll see you guys soon.
Everybody be safe.
too. Everyone stay healthy and safe. And
Take care, everyone. Stay healthy out there.
And
Got
thank
it,
you to all our fans for loving the movie.
got it. Be good, guys. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, guys.